Hello there, I'm Ken Loggins. Welcome to Home Folks, Dickson County. Now, while you're here at the YouTube channel, please subscribe. It's absolutely free of charge to do so. Also, next time you're on Facebook, look us up there, Home Folks, Dickson County on Facebook, and please follow us there. Appreciate it when you do that. I had the privilege of being on the air in Dickson County for a decade plus, mid-90s through the mid-2000s. Made a lot of lifetime friends during that run, and our very special guest on this edition of Home Folks Dickson County, certainly one of those lifelong friends. We first met almost 30 years ago to the day. Came aboard as a sports board op. Before too long, we were doing a show together on WDKN, The J Party. You might have heard of it, maybe not. This guy would go on to have radio adventures in Clarksville, Jackson, Nashville, including the world-famous Air Castle of the South, 650 WSM. And it's our pleasure to catch up on this edition of Home Folks Dickson County with J. Patrick Tinnell. How are you, my man?
I'm doing good.
I feel like the Brian Setzer Orchestra should be playing in the background right now. Now, if you know what we're talking about, we're going back almost 30 years to the J Party days on Dickson Radio. But we're going to get to that. We're going to get to a lot of things involving a guy that, I've known for almost 30 years, had a opportunity, a privilege to work with for many of those years. And we were on the air together in Dickson County back in the late 90s. But let's go back to square one. Where does the J. Patrick story begin? You're a Humphreys County native, correct?
Absolutely, yep. Born in Nashville, in the Baptist Hospital there in Nashville, 1973. My parents lived on a farm, my grandparents' farm. And then my dad, when he and my mom got married, they kind of moved to the farm there. That's where I grew up. Kind of near Gorman, Tennessee, but definitely out in the county, Humphreys County. Waverly's where I went to school.
Tell me about your parents, their names, their backstory.
Danny and Patricia. They met in Nashville, actually. My dad was an accountant. He was working at H&R Block in East Nashville. My mom was working there, doing some office work. That's where they met, fell in love. This would have been 71 to 72 probably. And then they got married. I guess there was a story that my mom was dating someone else at the time, and my dad kind of won her over. Okay. And then when they got married in my grandparents' house, my paternal grandparents. They got married, and then I come along in 73, and my whole life, my parents would always say it seemed like I was always around because I was born, but about a year after they got married. Well, yeah, about a year after they got married.
Okay,
they were born in 72. I was born in 73.
Tell me about your siblings.
Amanda and Julie. I have two sisters, and I'm the oldest.
Okay.
Julie's the middle. She's about 4 years younger than me. And Mandy is the youngest at about 12 years younger than me. And so my sister Julie has two grown adult daughters. And my sister Mandy has 5 boys. And the oldest just graduated high school.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. All right. So as a youngster, you were raised
on the farm.
On that place.
Farm boy.
Okay. Yeah. What was on that farm?
Cattle. A lot of livestock. We would go through periods we'd have chickens. We always had cattle. That was all a mainstay. And we would have goats at one point, or a few goats. Hogs at one point. Yeah, and we had a lot of land. So we do a lot of agricultural stuff. Hay, big garden. I remember a lot of summers was spent with my grandmother and my mother helping in the garden and them canning, doing a lot of canning. Yeah, I'm really surprised the whole agricultural thing didn't take more than it did in me. Because I know so much about farming that I've never used that information I have.
I didn't realize the extent of your agricultural background as far as you were up at the crack of dawn.
Let's not get carried away. I mean, I'm sure my parents would have loved if that was me to be more helpful than I actually was. But there were a lot of experiences on the farm that at the time I couldn't wait to leave, right?
Oh, yeah. That's
Like that was not going to be my life. But now I long for the days where I could just go work with my uncle in the hayfield all day, throwing 50-pound bales of hay, which I was not very good at either. Even though I grew up on the farm, I was not good at the farm life.
You briefly alluded to your paternal grandparents. Did you have the opportunity to spend any amount of time around your grandparents on either side?
My maternal grandparents, I never knew. I didn't really know a lot of my mom's side of the family when I was growing up. I would see them on occasion, like her. She had a lot of brothers and sisters, and I would see them periodically through my life. But my dad's mom and dad, my dad's dad, I remember like being really. He passed away when I was in kindergarten. I remember that clearly, but I also have like memories of being close to him. And my favorite one is like I remember like sitting in their living room, like in the summer when he was still around, and like the cool feeling of that kind of, 70s, 80s tile flooring with air conditioning on it, and being with him and like watching the Cincinnati Reds play. Okay. And I remember he was a big Pete Rose fan. And I have those memories of him. I remember walking around. He would walk around the hayfields like at night after dinner. I remember going on walks with my grandfather. And I remember sitting on their front porch, watching, because the farm I lived on was right on Highway 70. And there was also the train track ran parallel to Highway 70. So we would sit out there and watch traffic, watch trains go by. So I do have some memories of my grandfather. My grandmother, a huge part of my life growing up. I had her until I was well into my 20s. 98, I think it's when she passed away. So my grandmother, huge part of my life. We lived right next door to her growing up, so a lot of memories of her.
You mentioned you weren't that keen about farm work. What were you keen on growing up as a youngster? What were you into?
TV.
Who's not?
Movies.
Yeah.
And eventually music.
Sure.
I remember like the big shows from the 70s and the 80s, the A-Team, Knight Rider, Dukes of Hazzard, Airwolf, all those shows, like Saturday morning cartoons. Big impact on me, and I just loved entertainment, and that would be where I would lean into. I think that's how I eventually got led to, and I know we'll get into that, but into radio. I just wanted to be in the world of entertainment. Like in high school, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but in high school, excelled in drama, band, anything that was performing and entertainment. I was just always drawn to. So.
Where did you attend elementary school?
Waverly Elementary School. I
have this vision of a young J. Patrick as being a straight A student that the teachers all loved. Am I totally off base here?
Totally off base. I did not do well at school. I was always that kid with my head in the clouds.
The escapism thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a vision problem that went undiagnosed for years.
That never helps.
So I couldn't really see the chalkboard. I always had to, you need to apply yourself more. That was always something like you're not trying hard enough. So that was a constant message that was relayed to me from parents and teachers all through my elementary career, middle school career, and high school. I did okay.
Yeah.
High school I did okay.
At what point did everybody figure out, okay, J. Patrick needs some glasses here?
Oh, sixth grade.
Took a while. So,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All the way to sixth grade. And it was actually a physical for Boy Scout camp and doing the eye test. And the doctor was like, there's a problem here.
Okay.
But up until then, that's the thing about a vision problem. You don't know you have it.
Yeah, it's just how you see the world. Favorite teachers that maybe had the biggest impact on you in elementary school that you can recall?
In elementary school, it was definitely my kindergarten teacher, Miss Debbie, because growing up on a farm, just being around family, And then one day, oh yeah, for 8 hours a day, you're going to go be around strangers. It's a little bit of a culture shock.
Sure.
Miss Debbie actually became like a family friend. My dad did her taxes every year. So yeah, she was very impactful. I have to say, like, probably the most impactful elementary school teacher was in fact my kindergarten teacher.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're talking how big of a class?
30, 35.
35 in your class. So a pretty small group, probably pretty tight. Did you have a couple of good buddies that you established a good rapport with pretty much right off the bat, or were you just friends with everybody?
Yeah, it was kind of whoever was in my class that year, I would find somebody to hang out with, because come summer, I wasn't going to see them. And we weren't going to hang out after class because I'm going to be bussed out to the farm out in the county after school. So I never really had that friends that you hang out with at school that you make, that you see after class, maybe neighbors. Like, I had none of that. Now, once I got into high school, that absolutely changed. But up until probably up until middle school, at least, I really didn't have a lot of close friends that were people that I went to school with.
But you got along well with others.
Yeah, for the most part. I was easy for the bullies to pick on. They always liked me.
I had the same issue. Visiting with J. Patrick Tinnell here on this edition of Home Folks, Dickson County. I encourage you, while you're here at the YouTube channel, please subscribe if you haven't already. And next time you're on Facebook, please follow us there, Home Folks, Dickson County on Facebook. We appreciate that very much. Talking with J. Patrick Tinnell. We're in the elementary school years at Waverly. When do you first meet Josh Galloway?
First meet him in elementary school.
Okay.
For sure. We were in the same Boy Scout troop.
Okay.
And then we were both in band. Of course, you get into band, in middle school, 6th grade. We became best friends in high school because we both kind of had that draw to the same type of movies, same type of literature, both Stephen King fans, and comedy. That kind of, draw to comedians. How some people view musicians or actors, that's how we viewed a lot of the comedians. And just things like National Lampoon Radio, the same kind of love for something like that. And so we became absolutely best friends, along with our friend Jay. The three of us and Chris, like the four of us. I would say Josh, Jay, Chris.
That was the clique.
That was the clique, yeah.
And what instrument did you play in band?
Trombone, just like my dad. My dad played trombone through high school and college. He went to college at Austin P. Amazing trombone player. Just a fan. Like, the tone that man had on that horn was amazing. And the kind of trombone player that you stop and listen to. Very good at jazz trombone and that big band sound.
Okay.
And that is why I played the trombone. It's because my dad played trombone.
Did he have one at home? Would he play at home quite often?
Oh, yes.
While you were growing up?
Yeah. It's an interesting story about his trombone. Beautiful Con trombone. I wish I could remember the model number off the top of my head. The reason he got that trombone in high school is he actually got hit by a car on Highway 70.
Wow.
Was when he was in high school, and he, was rehabilitating, broken bones, arm, legs, like messed up pretty good. He was already in the band at the time, and his band director was named Jerry Hooper, and that's the trombone that Jerry Hooper had. And my grandparents, his parents, as a way to like kind of give him a light at the end of the tunnel. Get through this, we're going to get you that trombone. He got through it. They followed through, got him that trombone. He and his band director in high school had the same type of trombone. And not to jump ahead in the story here, Jerry Hooper's son, Jerry Jr., would end up being my band director in high school. And I have my dad's trombone now. Still, like, I got rid of the one that I played because it was like beat up, but his horn is still, that is one of my most cherished items. I'm not big on, I like relationships. I like people. I don't like stuff, but that is one thing that is very important to me is my dad's trombone.
Super cool story.
Yeah.
What instrument did Josh play?
Trumpet.
Trumpeter.
Yes, he was. Really good, too.
Mm-hmm.
Josh is a much better musician than like, I always got
Don't
through.
sell yourself short.
No, I'm not. I always got through. Even in something that I loved. I just, maybe undiagnosed ADD at the time, too. But just the comprehension of what you need to know to learn music and learn how to perform music, like, it just never clicked with me. Mm-hmm. But Josh was great. All of my friends were great. Jay, Chris, they were all great musicians compared to me. And I was kind of there to fill out the quartet.
How early, probably I'm sure listening to radio early on, at what point does possibly something click and you think that might be a cool thing to do one of these days?
Middle school. You know, it's interesting. When I was growing up, when I was super young, it was a lot of classic country in our house and Southern gospel music. And my dad would perform. My dad was a choir leader at our church for a while. And he would perform with like the quartets and whatnot that they would form from the congregation at the church. There was a radio station out of McKenzie, Tennessee that would play a lot of Southern gospel music that he listened to a lot. My mom, huge Elvis and classic country fan. I mean, I knew, even though I had no idea what it meant, I knew the words to Sunday Morning Coming Down by Johnny Cash when I was probably like 10. Because I would hear a lot of Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings and Merle Haggard. That's the records that she had. My dad would have like Tommy Dorsey and Glenn Miller, and then a lot of Southern gospel records too that he would listen to. So it was just this weird like amalgamation of music, growing up until I got to those years when I just started deciding what I wanted to listen to. And that's when I gravitated to hair metal.
Sure.
And then the radio station I wanted to listen to was actually a top 40 station. I mean, there was KDF in Nashville. I would listen to that. But what I tried to listen to every morning was Coyote McLeod and the Zoo Crew on Y107.
Okay.
Like, you've gotten past the 1970s kind of boss jock sound, and that has kind of morphed into that shock jock sound of the 80s, and that was definitely Coyote McLeod. I mean, he was a boss jock in the 70s. He had the Zoo Crew, he and Rhett Walker, and a whole cast of characters doing that, in your face, irreverent, FM, morning show shtick. And I loved it. I loved every second of it. My dad hated it. Hated that I would listen to Coyote McLeod.
Which made you love it more.
Absolutely.
At that point, that's what we do.
Right.
So would you say Coyote is probably your biggest influence?
Coyote was a big influence. Y107 always played American Top 40 on the weekend. Mm-hmm. So Casey Kasem, big influence on me. This is going to sound strange, but I call it radio because of the way I consumed it. Back in the day, over-the-air television, the VHF was an FM frequency. So if you had a radio tuned correctly, you could actually pick up the audio of TV signals on a radio. I happen to have one of those radios. So I would go to bed at night listening to The Tonight Show and Late Night with David Letterman. So both of those big influences on me. And they would have a lot of comedians come on. So, Jerry Seinfeld off the top of my head, huge influence on me through just listening to not watching them on television, but staying up later than I should be, listening to a little headphone with the radio at night. And, but then on the other end of that spectrum of radio that I loved when I was a kid, my dad would listen to NPR out of Nashville on Saturdays and a Prairie Home Companion with Garrison Keillor. Mm-hmm. And so I fell in love with that whole kind of storytelling side. Yeah, I mean, it's and my mom had Jerry Clower tapes. So, I mean, very eclectic.
Yeah.
But I'm glad because I think it helped form my sensibilities as I was growing up.
Certainly. In high school, in addition to the band, any other extracurricular activity that you were heavily involved in?
Loved drama. I mean, and that's when me and Josh would write sketches that, we would perform as an assignment for drama, and Boy Scouts. I mean, Boy Scouts was big for me. I joined late. when I joined Cub Scouts the very last year that you could be a Cub Scout, like a Weeblo. So I was a Weeblo Scout 1 year in Cub Scouts. And then it was probably like another 2 years before I actually joined the Boy Scouts after Weeblo. But then once I did, and all my friends from school were in Boy Scouts and the band. So it was kind of like this, at this point now, I'm seeing everybody that I'm friends with on a regular basis. Weekly scout meetings, campouts on the weekends where we would get in trouble because this group would go exploring on our own and then get lost. And then the scoutmasters would have to come find us. We would do that probably more often than we should have. And then band, and band trips, traveling around to, Austin P or McGavick High School in Nashville. That was a lot of fun. High school was a lot of fun for me. I feel like that's when I finally started to, kind of come out of my shell a little bit.
Visiting with J. Patrick Tinnell on Home Folks, Dickson County. Thank you so much for joining us. We're almost to graduation time at Waverly. Now, what year would you graduate?
1992.
Class of 92 at Waverly High. Are you pretty locked into what you want to do?
No.
You for sure know you want to go to college.
I mean, I really wanted to not go my first year, and my parents saw it differently. And so kind of the compromise was a junior college.
Okay.
And so the first of many schools I would go to would be Aquinas Junior College in Nashville, which is right there on West End near St. Thomas Hospital.
General studies you started out with?
Yeah, that was it. Another inspirational teacher that I would have one in high school. Like I always like history, social studies. Those were the subjects that I started gravitating towards in high school. I kind of started thinking about like maybe you want to be a history teacher, maybe a lawyer at one point I was thinking. But I had an English instructor at Aquinas Junior College at the time. He was great, like a Dead Poets Society type.
Oh, yeah.
Type, motivational teacher. And that would, and I'm so happy I took his course because that really started to broaden my mind to consuming plays and literature that I probably wouldn't have normally. When I was in high school, I tried to do the Cliff Notes for the Odyssey because I didn't want to read it. I wanted to read it then. I wanted to read Homer then. I wanted to read Edgar Allan Poe. And I credit that to that instructor, who I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but he was great. He was great. Beautiful instructor. We loved him.
We would send you a shout out if we knew your name.
Absolutely.
But it's the thought that counts.
That's true.
So, you're not going to land on the air in Dickson County for a few more years. Do you have a radio gig anywhere before then?
I would go from, try to follow me here. I would go from Aquinas Junior College.
J. Patrick's Tour of Colleges.
Yes, here we go. My college tour.
You'll be quizzed on this at the end of the pod, okay?
Then I would have a crush on a girl that I knew was going to Tennessee Tech in Cookeville, an engineering school. I'm not an engineer. But I also had a lot of friends that were going. My buddy Jay that I mentioned earlier, he was going there because he was in the band there. So I had a lot of friends there, and I just knew that if I went to the school, this girl was going to like me. That I'm going to call her up and I'll be like, "Hey, guess where I'm going? Where I'm transferring? Tennessee Tech. This is my plan. I'm going to go to Tech and I'm going to major in history, and I'm going to be a history teacher." So I go to Tech, start majoring in history, and I suddenly realized at an engineering school, all the classes are taught as if everyone there is going to be an engineer, which I was not. And so I was there for a year. It was terrible. It got so bad. I stopped going to classes. So much wasted money. I stopped going to classes. One point, one of my instructors called the dorm room one morning because I had not been in class for so long. They just wanted to make sure I was still alive.
Welfare check.
Yes, it was. It was indeed a welfare check. When I was at Aquinas, I got a job at Toys R Us in Bellevue.
That's right.
And it got so bad with the school in Cookeville. I was like, you know what? I could at least make some money. I could drive to Bellevue 3 days a week. And so I did. I drove from Cookeville. Great planning on my part. So smart. I got it all figured out. So I was driving from Cookeville to Bellevue 3-4 nights a week the second half of that year. Needless to say, I did not return to Tennessee Tech in Cookeville after that first year. And I was on probation. So I waited out, worked through the probation, but I did work a little bit at the station, the radio station in Cookeville. That was my first exposure to a radio station, was the college station there in Cookeville. You think I would learn my lesson and think maybe college wasn't for me. Or at least figure out what I want to do before I stop throwing student loan after student loan at this. That's when I go to MTSU.
Okay.
I do some work for the student-run station there. No, the NPR station there is where I did some work that year. Still not really going to class like I should. Didn't do well. Earned myself another probationary period. Got through that. Went back 96. Now this gets us to about 1996. And that's when I'm working at the student-run station and the public radio station there. I'm working at both stations, WMOT and WMTS on campus. And that's where our worlds are starting to come together here. Now I'm starting to realize, I do want to work in radio. This is what I want to do. I'm starting to lean on everything that inspired me as a child and as a young adult. And now I'm like, this is what I want to do. I want to do radio.
Dickson County. How does that get on your radar?
I was going to visit my parents. My parents are in Waverly. To go from Murfreesboro to Waverly, you can take the interstate. I mean, there's lots of ways to get there, but I liked to drive through downtown. One day I'm driving through downtown and I'd passed DKN, I don't know how many times in my life. And I've tried to replay this moment in my head for 30 years. Ken, I think it might have been you I saw on the air when I drove past the window and I saw somebody on the air. It had to be you based on like what you were doing then. And I was like, I wonder if they'd let me work there. I wonder if I could do something like a real radio station, not like a college radio station. So the next day I go back to my parents' house that night. I stop, I meet Christy. I go into the station, meet Christy. I was like, hey, is the program director here? You want to talk to Chuck Dauphin? He'll be back tomorrow morning. He does mornings here. Oh, okay, great. I'll just stop by in the morning. Next morning, came by, waited out in the lobby. Chuck came out during a break. I was like, hey, man, I'm working at these student stations. I think I want to do radio. I would love to just hang out here and just watch what you do and try to learn radio. And, and he was like, yeah, that would be okay. So that next day, which was this is the weird thing about this, because I was thinking about this the other night, had to be, because I know Independence Day had just been released in the theater, and that was July of 1996. So it was right around this time, 30 years ago, that I walked in, started hanging out with Chuck on the mornings, and then ultimately he'd bring me on the show. And then when football season would come around that year, they hired me to run the football games.
Board op. If you remember DKN during that time, lots of larger-than-life personalities. Warren Medley.
Yes.
Henry Reagan. Gordon Rhodes was there. You're wading into all this and working with these guys for the first time.
It felt like home pretty quick for me, DKN did. Gordon was always just so supportive and always super nice. Jackie was always super nice to me. Gordon had the vehicle that I still want to this day, with an International Scout. I was actually looking at them last night online, like how can it like a vintage International Scout? They're still so expensive. Warren Medley, probably the nicest man I ever met. Donnie Craig.
Oh yeah.
The list could go on and on of the people that I met in Dickson County just working at DKN.
Any on-air things, crazy things, goofy things that happen that jump into your head during those first few months?
Yes, there's several. That is also a very long list. Working the phones.
We've got time.
Working the phones for Swap and Shop. They were like, do you want to do Swap and Shop? And of course, oh yeah. And I watch them do it. And I watched you do it. How hard could it be? I see what you're doing. You're talking on the radio. You're bringing people on. They say what they want. And to actually perform Swap and Shop back then with the technology that we had, it was just, how many dial tones did I put on the air during that first? and of course, that young in the business, you're nervous. You're gun shy, and then when something bad happens, it's just a domino effect, and then the stuttering starts, and then the sweat starts to pop out on your forehead, and everything is scary for the next hour. Swap and Shop, first time on the air, first thing I ever did live on WDKN, other than hanging out with Chuck, and it went horribly. So that's number one on the list. That is number one on the list.
Now, how could it go horribly?
Well, putting the
just dial tones on the air.
Dial tones on the air, not hitting, like thinking that your commercials are over and forgetting to stop the computer, and then you go to talk and the next element starts playing, and then trying to stop the computer and not knowing, should I just cut it off or should I let it play? What should we do here? The phones were the dial tones on the air. That was the worst part. And then also remember, I think it might have been that summer, as I'm comfortable. That was a big studio, actually. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of room around the board. And do you remember the turntable over here on the right-hand side?
Yes.
And there were always CDs like stacked up right behind the turntable. And I remember one day like just knocking a whole stack of CDs onto the turntable and breaking the arm of the turntable.
Well, that wouldn't make any noise. I'm sure no one noticed.
It's horrible. Horrible.
Talking with Dickson radio alum Jay Patrick on this edition of Home Folks Dickson County. We're talking about his days on the radio in Dickson County. You're getting your feet wet. You're doing Swap and Shop. You're doing some board opping. When do you start thinking about a show like the Jay Party?
Instantly. It was my number one goal the first morning I talked to Chuck. How do I do my own show here? But it would take a year. It would take a year.
Yeah.
I think we launched the Jay Party in coordination with the first football game in the fall of '97.
You're probably leaning a bit on your Coyote McLeod listening days. You wanted a posse on the air with you. You found several willing participants.
I did.
In a hurry.
You, namely. I mean, this was like, I remember us having conversations like this was going to be the plan, that we'll do this 2-hour show before Friday night football games. And yeah, it was just talk on the radio, be funny, make each other laugh. That was really it. And then as we would go along, like Don Craig would come on board, Chuck would be part of it. My friend from high school, Josh, moved back to the area. We brought him in for a long time. A friend that I made in Bellevue at Toys R Us, Mike Lester, who did amazing impressions. He would come on as Mean Mike Lester. Mike Dudley, who worked for Dickson Electric. Mike was one of the first people I met when I started hanging out at the radio station, Mike Dudley, and then we would become lifelong friends, and then he would be part of the show. It really was whoever wants to be Gordon would come in and, make appearances. Whoever, it was almost open to a policy. If you want to be on the show, just come by, hang out, and you'll be on the show.
And I talked with, during our visit with Christy on Home Folks Dickson County, Christy with a K, we were talking about this, the latitude we were given as far as programming. Gordon and Jackie just said, show up, do your job, stay within FCC guidelines if you can, have fun. And we just ran with it and probably took liberties that we shouldn't.
But didn't know we were taking liberties because, well, at least I didn't, because I was so, naive in the business. Like, this seems like a good time. I'm having fun. I'm having a blast.
We would often break format.
Yes.
Pretty much whatever
we wanted to play, we would play.
The format was country at the time, but during the Jay Party, you might hear a little bit more Americana, outlaw type thing.
And honestly, a lot of the music that we would play on the Jay Party I would end up being a fan of, like the Mavericks, my exposure to, and I ended up being a huge Mavericks fan. And that's because we would play them pretty regular on the show. Dwight Yoakam I knew, but wasn't like a huge Dwight Yoakam fan until we started playing a lot of Dwight Yoakam on the show. And if it was something that wasn't country, then we would just call it like a bumper music, and we would just play whatever we wanted.
Yeah. And Jay was talking about the swap and shop phone lines. There was no 5-second delay. There was no delay at all. Everything was live. The phone would ring, and we would just put
right on the air.
Put them on the air. And whatever happened, happened. And I can't believe that we got away with that as many times as we did, and nothing. I can't recall any kind of profanity that we didn't catch in a hurry. And even then, I don't recall it happening.
No, it didn't. Like it never happened. There was never a profane word said, even on the phones, to the best of my memory.
Which wouldn't happen today.
No. The right kids knew you were doing that and knew you didn't have a delay. I was thinking about this today. It was fun. It was a great show. Still one of the highlights of my career. Not really targeted for the demographic that we were serving at WDKN.
And that didn't really enter into our mind. No. We just wanted to do something that was fun. Mm-hmm. A lot of the bits we tried, they would fall completely flat. Some were pure gold.
Yeah.
It was just kind of 50-50, hit or miss. But when it worked, it worked. And when it didn't, we just moved on to the next thing. And we were talking about phone calls. The most memorable phone call I remember us getting on the J Party was from the legendary coach in Dickson County, Homer Hamdorf, called. He asked you if you were insane.
Uh-huh. Well, yes, sir, I am.
And I still have that call somewhere. But that was classic stuff. Coach Hamdorf was not our biggest fan.
He was not. He did not like the show. Had I realized what he was to the community at the time, probably would have been more respectful. Exactly. But I didn't know.
The funniest moments, I thought, were rarely planned. And we would plan a lot of bits in advance. But I think some of the funniest moments were just off the cuff, things that would happen. Case in point, one afternoon, you completely cracked me up because we had an in-studio television. The primetime soap Dallas was on. You encouraged everyone that was listening, turn your TV channel. If you're at home, turn it over to TNT. Dallas is playing. Turn down the TV volume. I'm going to supply the audio. And you proceed, and this was nothing short of amazing because it wasn't planned. You proceed on the air to do a scene between JR and Bobby. And you do both voices. I don't know how you did it, but I was over there just in the floor laughing because it was so spot on. Now, I don't know. I have no idea how many people were participating. Maybe none.
Probably none.
But it was really entertaining for us. It was great.
I'm so dumb that I'm going to try a very complicated improv routine. See, this is, as I'm older now, I realize what we were actually doing. And how, if you text me with doing something like that today, I'd be like, probably not. Not doing that. It was a lot of fun, though.
And Chuck was always the best sport. He would let us call him while he was at home in the bathtub.
In the tub.
Yeah. And we would do on-air bits.
Yeah.
And, of course, we'd give him a hard time about being in the bathtub and all that stuff.
We're going to hear the water splash. Chuck, are you in the tub? Do you remember the song that we would play, Senor Burns?
That's right.
From the Simpsons soundtrack?
Exactly.
As we turned the satellite phone to Burns, Tennessee. Da, 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 da.
So much fun. And we were roomies for a little while.
Yes, we were.
You and I. 108 Villa Circle in Dickson. And I had to go and get married. And
thanks for breaking up the band, man.
I booted you out onto the street. And Mel and I talk about it all the time. We should have just let J. Patrick stay. We had that spare bedroom. Could have helped with the bills.
Well, that's true. I mean, that could have been helpful for everyone. But I was, at that point, I'd left DKN. So I was working in Clarksville at that point, right?
This would have been 2000.
Oh, yeah. I was definitely in Clarksville by then.
Q108.
Q108.
Steve Burke was
After work.
was your boss there,
Yeah.
and you were his sidekick on his afternoon show.
Mm-hmm.
He undeniably was one of your biggest influences, I think, and as far as teaching you things that we couldn't teach at WDKN or didn't choose to teach or didn't even know. That might have been your first really bona fide radio gig.
It was definitely the most structured radio gig I had
Yeah.
at the time. And yeah, there was none of the shenanigans that we were doing on the J Party when I got to Q108. Like, I'd been at DKN on the air maybe 2 months that I was crafting out resumes and audition tapes, and I was driving to the various radio stations and dropping these off. Mm-hmm. And it's, hey man, if you got anything, please just give me a call. If you got anything. And one of those fell into the hands of Scotty O'Brien at 102.5 The Party, which Scotty and I are still friends today. He works in the music industry now. He's label Broken Bow, BBR. He ended up getting my air check and resume, making fun of it on the radio. One morning. Yeah, this was right after I was working at DKN.
I have never heard this
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
So your work at DKN was on
102.5 The Party.
102.5 The
Played
Party.
my terrible air check of somebody who'd been in radio a month, for real, a month, and just roasted me one morning. You've never heard it because I didn't want to talk about it. I mean, why would you want to talk about that? That a morning show guy in Nashville roasted you for a good 20 minutes. And I'm like on the way to my job at Toys R Us listening to this live on the air as it happens.
Now, these days, you would go viral. You would be a sensation.
Exactly. Thank goodness. It was back then. And then one of those, after I'd been at DKN for a couple of years, drove up to Clarksville, dropped it off at the office there, and Steve gave me a call. And Steve's got Steve's got like a real radio voice. Mm-hmm. And Friday night, he would do the 80s Mix Fest, which was like an all-night 80s show from like 7 to 11 or midnight. So the first thing was, and you probably remember, like when he gave me a call, and I would go up there, and he's like, he wants me to sit in, do the 80s Mix Fest all night. So I did that with him. And that kind of led to a choice that I could make. I had two choices. One, I could voice track nights, and they would show me how to voice track, and I could be the voice at night. Or I could do, and it be my show, or I could do second chair with him, do traffic and weather live every afternoon, an afternoon drive. That's what I went with. I'm thankful, though, because if I were going to have the career that I would end up having in radio, I needed to work with someone like Steve, because he took the time to break a lot of bad habits, force me to speak better on the air. A lot of times, these lessons would be taught to me live on the air. Great example. I was his second chair, and then I would also do news headlines and traffic for Clarksville. One afternoon, there was a cement mixer that was having a malfunction on Wilma Rudolph Boulevard and on Q108. And we've got a broken down cement mixer on Wilma Rudolph Boulevard, and cement's just pouring out onto Wilma Rudolph Boulevard. And Steve's like, whoa, hold on a second. What was that? A cement mixer? What are you, the Beverly Hillbillies? Is it the cement pond? And like, I was horrified, but it was a great lesson. Like, I still remember this almost 30 years later.
Yeah.
And it was just things like that. But also he taught me the importance of talking to you, not talking to a group of people. Don't say y'all, everybody out there. Heaven forbid, everybody out in radio land. The kind of the magic happens with the listener in radio, just like the magic I'd experienced years ago as a listener of radio. You're talking to you, not they. You're talking to one person. And everything you say through the microphone, it's that one person that's listening. That was the biggest lesson I learned from him. And a lesson, honestly, I think is probably that has been forgotten in the influencer era because every one of those videos, hey, everybody,
Sure.
hey, subscribers, it's all plastic and phony. And we've really lost the kind of authentic nature of a personality and a host, in my opinion.
Catching up with Jay Patrick on this edition of Home Folks Dickson County. While you're here at the YouTube channel, I encourage you to subscribe. Easy to do so, free to do so, okay? And spread the word. Tell your friends about it. And also, when you're on Facebook, be sure and follow the Facebook page, Home Folks Dickson County on Facebook. It's the best way to keep up to date as far as what's coming down the pike, as far as future visits here on Home Folks Dickson County. Talking with J. Patrick Tinnell. How long after your time at Q108 I remember you wind up in Jackson, Tennessee at some point. How does that happen?
Steve gets, Q108 gets bought by Saga Communications. Steve was the operations manager in addition to the program director of Q108 and the afternoon guy. He ends up being let go by Saga. I get moved from Q108 to a brand new station they signed on, Classic Hits 99.7. That was my first program director job. Again, even though it was, by standards today, Saga was very radio focused, but even though it was like a corporate radio and they were taking over, man. But I got to say, the head of programming for Saga, Steve Goldstein at the time, great programming mind. I wish I'd been more receptive to a lot of what he was trying to teach me. And I would be years later when I realized what he was trying to tell me, especially when it came to how you schedule music, how you decide the music that you're going to play, your core artist, where they're scheduled in a clock, all of that I learned from Steve Goldstein when I worked for Saga. But Steve Burke got let go. He moves down to Jackson. He's down in Jackson for a couple of years. So this would have been around 2002. He calls me up. He goes, I really want you to come work with me again. The country music program director just quit. There's going to be an opening. I could probably help get you the gig. It's Clear Channel. Talk about corporate. It was Clear Channel, which would end up being iHeartMedia. Mm-hmm. So it was a Clear Channel radio station in Jackson, 100,000 watt FM, big flamethrower frequency, 104.5, WTNV. So I go down, interview. Scott Bebout was the general manager there. So he hires me. So now I'm the program director of WTNV in Jackson. And I was there for a couple of years working with Steve.
You were podcasting before I even knew what the word meant or what it was. Talk about your initial foray into doing some podcasting.
Yeah, I would say it was probably around 2009, 2010. And actually my first podcast that I didn't even know I was doing podcasts at the time. It was me. It is when I was working, after I left Clear Channel, I went to work for Cumulus in Nashville. Mm-hmm. And I was at Cumulus from 2004 to 2011, full time, most of that time. And so I met a lot of people at Cumulus. One of the guys I was working with, Aaron Roberts, was the program director, RQQ 97.1, and he was trying to start kind of like a side production company. And he had an office there on Music Row, had some equipment, not a lot. And then Jason Trotter was another guy. He was our promotions director. And so me and Jason Trotter were trying to put together like a pop culture talk show for radio. But honestly, what we were doing was a podcast because we would record it, I would edit it, I would put it together, and then I would put it up on a site called TalkShoe, which was an early podcast site.
Sure.
And so we were actually getting a little audience going just through, when we were just doing it to try to develop this thing into an actual radio talk show, which never happened. Aaron ended up leaving town, so the whole production company kind of went away. And so I'm left, I've got like the skeleton of a podcast. And then in 2011, my buddy Adam calls me up and he's like, hey, I'm listening, I've got these podcasts and I've got a couple that I listen to. What do you think about doing a podcast? And I was like, hey, I've got all the stuff we need. We could do a podcast tomorrow. Because my job at that point, now at that time, I'm out full time at Cumulus. And I'm the executive producer for a talk show called Dr. Asa On Call, which is lifestyle media. And we did that for a while in his wellness facility. He had a studio in there, closed that down, and we moved all the gear to the apartment that me and my wife had. Mm-hmm. And so it's 2011, and this guy is paying to have like T1 lines installed at this apartment complex. And so I've got this studio in our spare bedroom in our apartment. So I tell Adam, I'm like, yeah, come over. Let's start doing it. So we started doing podcasts in 2011. We did, it was the same thing that me and Jason were doing. I used everything, logo, graphics, everything. And it was the show. And then over the years, me and Adam would take that. It was the show. Then it was the Adam and JP show. And then it would end up being Podcasserole would be the name of the podcast. And that was like a 10-year journey with that, over 10 years. Wow. We started it in 2011. And I think we did our last real like weekly podcast like around 2022.
Okay.
Maybe. So yeah, so we made it like 10 or 11 years consistently, sometimes twice a week through the period of doing the podcast. And it was a pop culture podcast. And it just so happened like we were doing it at the rise of like all the fandoms and, you know, Marvel and DC and Star Wars was all like billion-dollar movies. And there was just like convention attendance was huge. So we were kind of part of that whole movement. And so Adam and I, we went to conventions from Louisville, like the Louisville Arcade Expo. We went to one in Metropolis, Illinois. And then we would go down to Dragon Con every year in Atlanta, Georgia, which is huge, which is comparable to San Diego Comic Con as far as attendance and how big it is. It like spans like the convention center there and like 5 hotels. It's a big convention. And so we went to that like 5 straight years. It was a lot of fun. That was doing the podcast with Adam. We never made a dime, but we had a ton of fun doing it and got to do a lot of really cool things.
Our very special guest here on Home Folks Dickson County is Jay Patrick. We're talking a lot about his professional journey. Let's talk a bit about your personal journey. Stephanie, at what point did she come into your life? How do y'all meet?
At Cumulus in Nashville, I would end up being Cody McLeod's producer for the last show he would do on that station, 97.1.
Like a full circle deal.
It was a full circle moment for sure. So I would end up being his last producer. And while I was doing that, Stephanie had graduated from college. She gets a job. She gets hired on to be the producer for the morning show on the talk station there at Cumulus, WTN. And RQQ's and TN studios at the time like butted up against each other. And there were glass all the way. So in the mornings, I could sit in my studio, look across the talk studio to their producer studio. We could see each other. And so, you know, we're like the only people getting up at 3:30 in the morning to produce radio shows that we know. So we start to talk and we start to hang out. We go out. I tell her, I suggest that we should date. She says no. I say, okay. Another couple of months, we start hanging out again. I suggest we should go out. It sticks that time. Just over a year later, we were married. We started dating in 2006, and then we get married in September of 2007.
You're working on 20 years now, aren't you?
Yeah.
Almost.
Oh, yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
You would eventually land at WSM.
Yep.
And I believe you started there programming their digital.
Yeah. Yeah. It was all the stuff that I'd done in podcast. I mean, I knew that that's where the future of radio was headed for sure, was digital content. But I always thought it could work hand in hand, right? Like terrestrial and digital could work hand in hand. And my belief in that just kind of happened to coincide with the fact that WSM, the general manager there at the time, they were going to start trying to do more podcasts, more streaming stations. They were going to launch a couple of streaming stations that were kind of sister stations to WSM proper. So they hire me as the digital program director. And so that was my first job there. I did that for about a year and a half. The program director of WSM decides to go take another job. So now I just become the program director of everything at WSM. I do that for a few months. Then the general manager leaves, and then I get hired as the general manager. So now I'm the general manager and program director. You can see here, like, as jobs leave, they're not really backfilling the roles. They're just saying, like, who can do all of this? And then I end up being that person. So all in all, I ended up being at WSM for over 6 years, almost 7 years, and a good bit of that as the GM and the program director.
I look back on your time there, and what really strikes me is how you were able to take an entity that's so steeped in tradition, about as steeped in tradition as you can get, as far as home of the Grand Ole Opry, been around forever. You embraced the new technology. I think WSM is better for it these days.
I think so too. It had to happen. As long as the people in charge are the people in charge right now, as long as that is the case, WSM will be a music station, a music AM station. And facts are facts, that's just not profitable in the 21st century. So if WSM had any chance to have any sort of real revenue stream, we were going to have to partner with sponsors and partners who wanted to identify with the Opry and WSM, had to be their driving force, not making their phone ring as soon as somebody hears a commercial, because it's just not going to happen. A couple of the stations were already kind of in the works when I got there. Mm-hmm. Route 650, which was an Americana-driven stream, and then Opry Nashville. Opry Nashville, Route 650 was kind of done by the time the whole idea of what it was going to be, I just had to implement once I got there. Opry Nashville was the first streaming station that I actually had my fingerprint on. The concept was going to be you tune in to the streaming station and it would be live performances from the Grand Ole Opry stage every time you tune in. Well, turns out there's some people that want to be paid.
Imagine that.
Yeah, there's unions that feel like they should get a little bit of that if you're replaying these. So legally, we couldn't do that. So I conceived Opry Nashville as kind of like WSM and the Opry celebrating Nashville and celebrating a new kind of country sound in Nashville. So we'd launch that with almost like news magazine type features. Mm-hmm. Opry Nashville would also be, if you go to the Grand Ole Opry and you're standing on the Opry Plaza, it's what you're going to hear coming out of the speakers. So we kind of conceived Opry Nashville in that way. And then something else that I wanted to do too was get WSM involved in podcasting, because we've got all this great archive. When we had Eddie Stubbs and Bill Cody and Mike Terry, these amazing legendary talents that we could kind of bring into the 21st century through being host for podcast elements. And so we did that. And yeah, not only in launching a couple of the streaming stations, I got to help launch several podcasts under the WSM umbrella, which I was very proud of.
You're able to be around so many artists, not only from the country format, but from all genres of music. Did you still, along the way, have any pinch yourself moments where you would just exhale and say, this is kind of neat for a kid from Gorman to be visiting with such and such? And you probably can't count them all
the time. It was really, and I'm glad, because I feel like if it had been one of those jobs that I retired from, I probably wouldn't appreciate it as much as I do now, having only done it, a little less than a decade. We would produce content from Garth to Dom Flemons, just an amazing banjo and acoustic guitar player, more on the Americana side. We did a podcast with him, but he had Steve Martin on as a guest. And so as I'm producing this podcast for Dom called American Songster Radio, like I get to be there and Steve Martin calls, that was a real pinch me moment. Mm-hmm. When I'm answering the phone, I'm like, WSM, hey, this is Steve Martin. I'm supposed to be doing a show with Dom. And I'm like, yes, Mr. Martin, let me get you on hold. And then I get to be a fly on the wall of not Steve Martin talking about comedy, which he did a little bit, but just talking about the banjo and his love of the banjo, and talking about, how he loved like the claw hammer style of banjo playing and how that's different from his style of banjo playing, and how Dom plays the banjo. And that was just an amazing experience. Just not only being there when that was being recorded, but then also I've got to take this all back and go make this a show now that we're going to share with everybody. Probably the show I'm the most proud of at WSM was called Building Nashville. And the concept of that show was going to be, and it was kind of self-serving to be honest, but the country music documentary was about to come out, Ken Burns' Country Music. Mm-hmm. And so I got invited about a year before that came out. I got invited to the BMI building, and it was going to be a little preview. And Ken Burns was there with his longtime producer. And so once again, I get to meet like one of my lifelong heroes, Ken Burns. And they show a bit of this documentary about a year before it's released on PBS. And so I go back and I'm like, okay, this is coming out in a year. We've got a year. I kind of know what he's doing with that. We've got a year to kind of do a podcast that maybe goes into more detail. I know he's going to talk about Minnie Pearl, but is he really going to talk about Sarah Cannon and who Sarah Cannon was? And how did Sarah Cannon become Minnie Pearl? And how important is WSM in her story? Well, it's very important. And it was, when I said it was self-serving, it was self-serving in the sense that I wanted to show the world you would not have country music today the way you have it had it not been for this radio station. And I remember when we were doing Building Nashville, and I say I'm the most proud of it because it was the most work I put into it. There were so many interviews that we did, and we were interviewing the author of the book, The Air Castle of the South. And it's a great book, and it was about WSM. And he made this statement that just sticks with me today. He said, WSM is not the greatest radio station of all time, but it is the most consequential radio station of all time, which I totally agree with. Mm-hmm. And so, so we do Building Nashville, which only lasted one season because the pandemic happened and all our funding got pulled for it. But in putting that together, the Sarah Cannon episode specifically, I got to interview Paul Rubens on the phone.
Wow.
Now, there were a lot of rules with, interviewing Paul Rubens.
I'm trying to figure out the Paul Rubens, Sarah Cannon connection here.
They were great friends.
Did not realize that.
They met at a Comic Relief, like either Comic Relief 1 or 2 is when they first met. And their connection was, there they are backstage, all these comedians, Robin Williams, Whoopi Goldberg, Eddie Murphy, all these comedians of the time have their act that they're going out and doing. But here are the only two people backstage that they are characters, and people only know them as their characters. Paul Rubens is Pee Wee Herman. Sarah Cannon is Minnie Pearl. Mm-hmm. That was their connection, and they connected and stayed lifelong friends. And we were told by Paul's people, like there were certain subjects that we were not to approach.
It's going to be parameters, yeah.
But Paul brought it up himself. Mm-hmm. And Paul said, and he said, when I had my incident in the 90s, the first person to call me and tell me it would be okay was Sarah Cannon. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's crazy.
Wow.
And so I got to interview not just the country music aspect of it, but like you said, all the Bacon Brothers, which honestly, the most intimidating interview I ever did. and the only interview I've ever done where I feel like Kevin Bacon hated me. But I got to interview Kevin Bacon and his brother. They played the Opry. They agreed to do an Opry backstage interview with me. And so here it is, Kevin Bacon, Footloose, A Few Good Men, like JFK. Like we could play 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon if you want, right?
Sure.
And just this actor that I've, held in such high regard for so many years, and an incredible musician. And I got to interview BR 549 when we were talking about the J Party and some of the bands that I discovered through the J Party. Mm-hmm. BR 549 is at the top of the list. Chuck Mead, I end up being very friendly with and convinced him to be the narrator for the Building Nashville podcast.
Okay.
So I got to know Chuck Mead of BR 549 really well. So yeah, man, it was just an incredible job. I'll never have an experience like those few years again. No, it was incredible. Also very stressful. So that's its own story. But.
Yeah, I mean, the two often go hand in hand. I feel a bit uncomfortable asking you this question because you've got a lot of career to go. But thus far, anything that you might do a little bit different that you can think of?
Well, are you talking life or career? Like radio?
Just pick one.
life would definitely be college with 100% certainty. Don't believe anybody that tells you, you shouldn't, you have to go to college. It didn't mean anything. Yeah. Like not having a college degree, even with this world of experience I have and working for leading the most significant, radio station of all time. It's still like if I had that college education, then, I feel like I would have a little more security.
That's interesting because it leads into the life advice that I always try to wrap up these visits with. I guess first and foremost, try to get that college education if you can. Any other life advice you might dispense to someone, maybe just starting out?
Make a connection. Be authentic. Even if your hook is a character that you create, it can still be authentic. Mm-hmm. For somebody that's starting out in radio, I think the more authentic you are going forward, and that can apply to traditional radio, podcast, you want to do a YouTube show. I think if you can make that authentic connection, I think that's why Mr. Beast is so successful. I think he found a way to make an authentic connection with the audience. Mm-hmm. That's why Mr. Rogers was so successful.
Yeah.
Because he looked in the camera and he spoke to you. It didn't feel fake and phony. But if you want that long career, like I said, even if it's a character that you create, be authentic. Mm-hmm. If it's full on life advice, I think my biggest life advice at 52, about to be 53 in November, is stop being distracted. Mm-hmm. We live in a world of distractions. And some of them are put there on purpose for us to be distracted. You talked about the algorithm. That's all social media is. It's distractions cultivated to you personally based on what you've bought, what you've watched, what you've ordered, what you've consumed, what you've eaten. So stop being distracted, because while you're distracted, real life is going on around you the entire time. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The connections that we have, the people in our life, not to sound corny and cliche, it really is short. The time that we have with other people is very short. Stop being distracted.
What a pleasure it's been to catch up. You've taken time out of your busy schedule, and I hope we can do it again.
Yeah, absolutely.
My goal, if we can ever get Josh Galloway south of the Mason-Dixon and we can get coordinated, I would love to do a J Party alumni roundtable.
Oh, absolutely. I would be totally down for that.
For this podcast. If you think we could keep it under control, do you think?
I think we could.
Which, that
we're all old men now.
It's not like the original show was ever under control.
No, it was not.
That was part of the charm. So, yeah, I would think even during the podcast, everybody would need to be talking at once. And we need to be somehow offending someone. So, we'll have to call that back up. I hope we get to do that one of these days.
Oh, man, I would love that so much. That would be awesome.
It'd be a lot of fun. J. Patrick Tinnell, our special guest here on Home Folks, Dickson County. Once again, appreciate it. We'll do it again.
Absolutely.
Once again, a reminder, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe here at the YouTube channel, Home Folks DC on YouTube. Please share the channel wherever and whenever you can. And don't forget, next time you're on Facebook, follow us there, Home Folks Dickson County on Facebook. For J. Patrick Tinnell, I'm Ken Loggins. Join us again very soon for another edition of Home Folks Dickson County. Till then, take care, everyone.